Hi everybody, Jeff Yasteen here. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and also follow us and subscribe to us on YouTube. Well, let's talk about the world's most valuable resource. It's not gold, it's not Bitcoin, it's not oil. We're talking about water. Now, as a business, it's relatively stable. We always need to use a certain base amount of water regardless of what the economy is doing. And in a world where the future climate is something of a question mark, according to scientists, water, creating it, pumping it, moving it, pricing it will likely make it even more valuable. And that's a good way to base a business. So roughly 2/3 of water consumption in the U.S. goes to agriculture. The rest goes for home and industrial consumption, bottled water, that sort of thing. Now, according to the federal government, in 2015, a government survey at that time said we used about 300 billion gallons of water a day. Now, that's like draining the equivalent of 600 million bathtubs of water every day. Or if you're familiar with the Bellagio Casino in Las Vegas and the huge lake in front with the big water fountain show every 15 minutes, well, we're talking about almost 14,000 Bellagio-sized lakes of water drained dry and refilled day after day after day. So there's definitely an investment case to be made for water. And I'm going to tell you my favorite pick on that in a moment. But before you can invest in something, you need to know a price for it. And in the stock market, we call it that process price discovery. So what is the price of water? Well, until recently, there was no one agreed upon national price. Water is a local, or if you have enough pipelines and irrigation canals, it is a regional market. But unlike oil or natural gas or even electricity, there is no national distribution pipeline network, if you will, for water. So water can be expensive in one place and comparatively cheap in another. But just this month, the NASDAQ and the CME, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, launched a first ever water futures contract and a water index. Now that's a big deal. It's never really existed before. And I think it's going to help push along the idea of water investing into a much bigger, more popular, and faster growing marketplace. Now, this water futures contract is based on the California water market. So in that respect, it's still based on a regional price. But what the futures contract does is provide a baseline, a reference, an official benchmark price. Having a benchmark helps water companies, water utilities, and regulators, and all the other players in this marketplace to get a better handle on what their local or regional water price should be. And from there, they can more easily justify in dollars and cents the investments they need to make in order to install new pipes or identify and patch leaks, because these systems lose volumes of water through their leakages. High efficiency pumps and high-tech sensors that will all help them to conserve water and use water more efficiently. So that's where the longer term investment thesis for all this comes from. But for now, I want to tell you about one water stock I like. It's called Global Water Resources, symbol GWRS. Now, basically it's a water utility. Has about a $260 million market cap, pays a 2.5% dividend. So their business is owning, operating, and managing water, wastewater, and recycled water utilities, for now mostly in the metro area around Phoenix, Arizona, and some smaller utilities around that area, including some over the border in California. So the company's business model is simple. In fact, I'm taking it straight out of their annual report. Their model is that they believe the world's water supply is limited and yet can be stretched significantly through effective planning, the use of recycled water, and by providing people the resources that promote wise water use. Now, the company calls this approach TWM, Total Water Management. And the idea is to manage the entire water cycle from where it's pumped out of the ground or a river to all of us who use the water, treating that water, and then reusing it yet again for irrigation and golf courses and those sorts of things before it goes back into the ground or drains off into a river and it starts the whole process over again. Now, Global Water Resources has turned that into a pretty good business, in my opinion, one that I think it could expand elsewhere by buying up or managing other water utilities. The company has more than doubled its revenue in the last 14 years. The company is also profitable. Earnings are expected to jump from 11 cents a share this year to 17 cents a share in 2022. From a value perspective, that might sound extreme. If you divide 17 in the price of the stock around 11, you come up with a triple-digit price-to-earnings ratio. But I think investors are anticipating continued steady earnings gains. They like the stability of the business, and they're willing to pay a premium for it, believing that GWRS has developed a long-term winning model for how to be a water utility. It's not just about water distribution like a typical utility would think of, but managing that entire cycle more effectively. And if we can take just a closer look at the stock chart for Global Water Resources, this is what it looks like. They haven't been public for that long. Basically, they went public April of 2016, and the stock is up. It's not quite. It actually did double between 2016 and basically pre-pandemic, just before the pandemic, getting up to almost $14, or basically $14 a share, before we saw this sell-off. As you can tell, though, since then the stock has rebounded some, but it is not taken off obviously the way some of our favorite tech stocks have done, and that's yet another reason why I think this is a stock to continue to look at. As I was mentioning earlier, and this is a more of a daily view, this is the pandemic or pre-pandemic, and then as the pandemic came in, that knocked the stock down, and it bottomed pretty much the same place where most other stocks did in late March, and it's up a little bit, but you can see obviously it's still about 20%, 25% below its all-time high price. And that is one reason why I think the stock is worth looking at. At a time like this, you want to be looking at stocks, at future positions that have not already priced in all the anticipated profits or realized profits from, let's say, for tech stocks, so much of it is the stay-at-home trade, right? We have to begin to look beyond that. I think that most of those kinds of stocks have more or less priced in the maximum that you could expect from the stay-at-home trade and from tech growth in general. And I think that in coming months, investors are going to be looking for other places, other kinds of opportunities to rotate into. I see Global Water Resources as one of them. It is only up a little bit from the lows and should continue to do nicely from here. Another thing that I like about the stock is that it pays a dividend. That's important because a company that has a dividend generally has pretty strong cash flow, and that's something that Global Water Resources has. I like the look of its cash flow. It has reported negative cash flow on occasion in quarters from before the last 4 to 5 years, which is around the time before it went public. And since then, it's reported nice, steady, consistent cash flow levels, which is good. A dividend helps to support a stock price. If a stock price gets too low, unless the business model is heavily damaged, which is not the case with something like this, with this stock, but unless the business model is heavily damaged, at some point as the stock gets down to a premium above what amounts to the 10-year treasury yield, which right now is like about 0.8%, 0.8%, that really helps to support the stock price. If it falls further, then investors come in and buy it, if only for the dividend and the cash flow to their accounts that it provides. So from here, I expect that we will see the stock move up to 14. Again, it's not going to do that overnight, not in the next week, not in the next few months, but it's going to just put in steady, nice growth owing to the kind of business, the stability of that business that it is in. Also, it does have the ability to raise prices. That's important to have some pricing flexibility. If you own any kind of stock, any kind of business, the best ones have the ability to raise prices. Now, as a water utility, a company like this, has to go to the local or state, depending on how it all works in Arizona, the utility board to get approval for that sort of thing. But this goes back to what I said earlier regarding having a water futures contract and a NASDAQ water price index, all of which are now, it's not something that's being planned. It's out there now. That's important because it gives a company like Global Water Resources or any other company in this sector the ability to go back to regulators and say, we need to be charging a better price. Doesn't mean people are going to be, priced in an exorbitant amount. Water is a resource that we all need to have equal access to, which sometimes is easier to say and harder to actually accomplish, especially in places like the West. But I do think that overall provides a nice backdrop for continued gains for Global Water Resources profitability, its earnings power, and of course all that should translate into a stronger stock price to come. So Global Water Resources, a stock to look at, put on your watch list, and I think it's viable right here. If you like what I'm talking about, again, make sure to subscribe to us. Follow me on Twitter at Jeff Yasteen. You can follow me on Twitter. I have just a kind of a regular feed and commentary going on most days, and the symbol or the username there is Jeff Yasteen 1, and I will talk to you again in future videos.